"Sir, my little brother won't wake up," the homeless girl desperately shouted to the millionaire. Lily ran barefoot through the streets of New York City, her small, injured feet barely feeling the hot asphalt beneath them. Her eyes, blurred with tears, desperately searched for help while carrying Tommy, her 3-year-old brother, who was unconscious in her arms. The weight of the boy, though small, seemed to increase with each step she took. Her legs trembled, but she couldn't stop. Not now. The morning was particularly busy on Fifth Avenue. Hurried executives passed by her without even noticing her presence, as if she were invisible. Lily was only 7 years old, but she already knew this feeling well. Since they had run away from home, she and Tommy had become part of that crowd of people that no one wanted to see. "Please, someone help me," she shouted, her voice getting lost among the horns and traffic noise. "My little brother won't wake up." It was then that a black car, imposing and shiny, stopped abruptly beside her. The tinted window slowly lowered, revealing the face of a middle-aged man wearing an impeccable suit. It was Richard Adams, one of the most influential businessmen in the country, known for both his fortune and his coldness in business. "What happened, little girl?" he asked, his voice revealing a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. Lily, breathless and trembling, approached the car. "My brother. He won't wake up. Please, mister, help us." Richard looked around, uncomfortable with the situation. His private driver, Wilson, awaited his instructions in the rearview mirror. He had an important meeting in 20 minutes where he would close a $1 million deal. He couldn't be late. But something in that girl's look paralyzed him. Her eyes, huge and frightened, carried a plea he had never seen before. For a brief moment, Richard saw himself reflected in that desperate look, remembering his own childhood, moments he had long tried to forget. "Wilson, cancel my morning appointments," he ordered, surprising even himself with the decision. Getting out of the car, Richard approached the children. Tommy was pale, his breathing almost imperceptible. The businessman tried to stay calm, but his heart was racing. He took the boy in his arms and for the first time in years felt completely vulnerable. "We'll take him to the hospital," he said, helping Lily into the car. During the journey, Richard observed the 2 children in the back seat through the rearview mirror. Lily held her brother's hand, whispering words of comfort that she herself needed to hear. Her clothes were dirty and torn, but there was a dignity in her way of acting that impressed him. "How did you end up on the street?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Lily hesitated, squeezing Tommy's hand tighter. We had to run away," she replied in a trembling voice. "We couldn't stay there anymore." Richard realized there was much more to that story than the girl was willing to tell at that moment. The fear in her voice was palpable, and something inside him twisted at the thought of what those children might have gone through. Arriving at the hospital, Richard used all his influence to ensure immediate care. While the doctors examined Tommy, Lily remained glued to his legs, as if he were her only anchor in the world. "Everything will be fine," he said, surprising himself with the sincerity in his own voice. "I promise." The words came out naturally without him thinking much about their meaning, but as soon as he uttered them, Richard felt the weight of that promise. For the first time in his life, something more important than money or power had crossed his path. The doctors worked intensely with Tommy, and every minute of waiting seemed like an eternity. Richard, accustomed to having control of everything in his life, now found himself completely powerless. He observed Lily, who had fallen asleep in one of the waiting room chairs, her small body finally yielding to fatigue. At that moment, a strange feeling began to take hold of him. It was as if the universe had conspired to put those children in his path. He, who had always lived surrounded by numbers, contracts, and meetings, now found himself facing something much bigger than all of this. The doctor responsible for the care approached with a serious expression on her face. "Mr. Adams, we need to talk about these children's situation," she said, taking him to a more private corner of the corridor. Dr. Emily Parker explained to Richard that Tommy was suffering from severe malnutrition and dehydration. The boy would need to stay hospitalized for a few days to fully recover. As he listened to the diagnosis, Richard felt his throat tighten. How had those children reached this point? "And what about the girl?" he asked, looking at Lily, who was still sleeping. "She also needs care," replied the doctor. "But the most concerning thing is their social situation. As their temporary legal guardian, you'll need to provide some information." Richard felt the weight of that responsibility fall on his shoulders. Legal guardian? He could barely take care of himself, always delegating his personal needs to employees and assistants. How could he be responsible for 2 children? At that moment, Lily woke up startled, calling for her brother. Richard ran to her, trying to calm her down. "Tommy is being well cared for," he said, holding her small hands. "Now I need you to be strong and tell me a little more about yourselves." Lily looked at him with distrust, but something in Richard's gaze made her feel safe. Perhaps it was the way he treated her, with a respect she had never experienced before. "We lived with our Uncle Victor," she began, her voice almost a whisper. After she left, he became responsible for us, but he..." Lily stopped, tears rolling down her face. Richard felt his heart tighten. He didn't need her to continue to understand what had happened. Years of business experience had taught him to read between the lines, and what he saw there filled him with a rage he had never felt before. "You won't go back there," he stated, with a conviction that surprised even himself. Lily hugged him tightly, sobbing against his Italian suit that cost more than many minimum wages. Richard didn't care about the clothes. For the first time in his life, something much more valuable was at stake. In the days that followed, Richard practically moved into the hospital. His office was temporarily transferred to the waiting room, where he conducted meetings via video conference, while keeping an eye on the children. His secretary, Sarah, was shocked by the sudden change in her boss's behavior, known for his inflexibility and perfectionism. Tommy began to show signs of improvement, and his shy smile lit up the hospital room. Richard discovered that the boy had a special talent for drawing, even at his young age. The walls of the room soon filled with colorful drawings, transforming the sterile environment into something more welcoming. Lily, in turn, revealed herself to be an extraordinarily mature child for her age. She told more about her story, about how she protected her brother, about the nights on the streets and the constant fear of being found by their uncle. Richard listened to everything carefully, making mental notes and planning his next steps. One afternoon, while Lily played with Tommy in the hospital room, Richard received a call that would change everything. It was his private investigator, hired to gather information about the children's uncle. "Mr. Adams, we found Victor Hayes. He's trying to locate the children and has important connections in the city." Richard felt his blood freeze. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to use all his resources to protect Lily and Tommy. Looking at the children through the room's window, he made a decision that would change not only their lives, but also his own. "Prepare the necessary documents," he ordered his lawyer over the phone. "I'm going to file for temporary custody." The news spread quickly throughout the hospital. The powerful Richard Adams, known for his coldness in business, was personally involved in the case of 2 homeless children. Some hospital staff whispered about his true intentions, others admired his attitude. But Richard didn't care about the comments. For the first time in his life, he felt he was doing something truly meaningful. Business meetings, million-dollar mergers, dinners with politicians, all of this now seemed so empty. The temporary custody process advanced, but not without obstacles. Richard discovered that his business empire, built over decades, was beginning to suffer shocks. Some important investors questioned his new stance, concerned about the time he dedicated to the children at the expense of business. "Richard, we need to talk," said Mark Sullivan, his partner for 20 years, during an extraordinary board meeting. "Your attitudes are affecting market confidence. The company's shares fell 15% last week." Richard adjusted his tie, a gesture he always made when he was about to make important decisions. The meeting room on the top floor of his corporate building was packed. Familiar faces stared at him with a mixture of concern and disapproval. "What exactly is bothering you, Mark? The fact that I'm helping 2 children, or the fear that it will affect your profits?" Richard's voice came out sharper than he intended, but he didn't regret it. "It's not about that," intervened Jennifer Moore, one of the major shareholders. "You built an empire based on rational decisions, not emotional impulses. This personal social project of yours is starting to look like an obsession." Richard slowly stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of New York City. Down below, the city pulsed in its frantic rhythm, indifferent to the dramas unfolding in the heights of the skyscrapers. "Do you know why I've always been successful?" he asked, still with his back to the group. "Because I've never been afraid to change when necessary. And now, for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that really matters." The silence that followed was interrupted by the ring of his cell phone. It was a message from the hospital social worker. Lily had had an anxiety attack after a nightmare. She was calling for him. "The meeting is over," announced Richard, picking up his jacket. "Sarah, prepare the documents for the transfer of 30% of my shares to a social fund. And schedule a press conference for tomorrow." The news of Richard Adams' decision spread like wildfire through the city. Economic newspapers predicted an unprecedented crisis in his companies. His closest friends tried to convince him to reconsider. But for Richard, there was no turning back. At the hospital, he found Lily huddled in a corner of the room, while Tommy slept serenely in his bed. The girl raised her eyes when he entered, and her face immediately lit up. "You came," she whispered, running to hug him. "I'll always come," he replied, feeling the small body trembling against his. "Do you want to tell me about the nightmare?" Lily hesitated, biting her lower lip. "It was about Uncle Victor. He was here trying to take us back." Richard felt his heart tighten. Lily's fear was real and justified. Victor Hayes had initiated a legal battle for custody of the children, claiming to be the only living relative. His political connections made the situation even more complicated. "No one is going to take you," Richard assured, his voice firm but gentle. "I promised I would protect you, remember, and I always keep my promises." That night, Richard didn't return to his penthouse in the Upper East Side. He stayed at the hospital, sitting in an uncomfortable armchair, watching the two children sleep. His cell phone wouldn't stop vibrating with unanswered messages and calls, but he didn't care. Sarah, his loyal secretary for 15 years, silently entered the room around midnight, bringing a folder with documents that needed his signature. "Are you sure about all this?" she asked, her voice low so as not to wake the children. "There's a fortune at stake." Richard looked at Lily and Tommy, their peaceful breathing in the silence of the room. "You know, Sarah, for the first time in my life, I'm not thinking about money. I'm thinking about doing the right thing." The press conference scheduled by Richard attracted national media attention. The Adams Enterprises auditorium was packed with journalists, all eager to understand why one of the most successful businessmen in the country was apparently abandoning everything he had fought for. Richard took the stage wearing a navy blue suit, his favorite. But there was something different about him. The usually severe countenance gave way to a more serene, almost paternal expression. "Good morning, everyone," he began, adjusting the microphone. "In recent days, much has been speculated about my recent decisions. Today, I'm here to announce the creation of the New Dawn Foundation, an institution dedicated to protecting and supporting children in vulnerable situations." A murmur ran through the auditorium. Flashes fired incessantly as Richard continued his speech. "For years, I built an empire based on numbers, profits, and acquisitions. But 2 weeks ago, fate put in my path 2 children who taught me more about real value than all my previous achievements." At the hospital, Lily and Tommy watched the live broadcast on the TV in their room, accompanied by Sarah. The little girl squeezed her brother's hand tightly, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Mr. Adams looks different, doesn't he?" commented a nurse passing by the room. Lily smiled, nodding. "He smiles more now," she replied simply. Back at the press conference, journalists bombarded Richard with questions about his mental health, possible personal crises, and the impact on his businesses. But he maintained his composure, answering each question with a serenity that surprised everyone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand your concerns," he said, raising his hand to silence the audience. "But today I realize that there is a difference between being successful and being truly fulfilled. The New Dawn Foundation is not just another social project. It's the beginning of a transformation that I hope will inspire other businessmen. Meanwhile, in the most prestigious law office in New York City, Victor Hayes watched the broadcast with a cynical smile on his lips. Beside him, a team of lawyers prepared documents to contest Richard's temporary custody request. "He may have money and influence," Victor muttered to his lead attorney, "but I have blood in my favor. Those children are mine by right." What Victor didn't know was that Richard had hired the best investigators in the country to look into his past. Every detail, every suspicious transaction, every hushed-up complaint was being meticulously documented. Sarah discreetly entered the hospital room, carrying a folder with the first investigation reports. Her face showed concern. "Mr. Adams," she whispered, moving away from the children, "we found something about Victor Hayes. Something big." Richard took the folder, his eyes quickly scanning the pages. His face became serious, and for a moment Sarah saw a flash of the old Richard Adams, the man who spared no effort to achieve his goals. "Arrange a meeting with the legal team for early tomorrow," he ordered. "And Sarah, don't let anyone enter this room without my express authorization." Lily, who was playing with Tommy in a corner of the room, noticed the change in the atmosphere. She approached Richard, her large eyes full of concern. "Is everything okay?" she asked, placing her small hand on his. Richard forced a smile, quickly, putting the folder away. "Yes, little one, just some work stuff." But Lily was more perceptive than her age suggested. "It's about Uncle Victor, isn't it? He's coming back to get us." Richard knelt down to be at her height, holding her hands firmly. "Lily, look at me. As long as I'm here, nothing bad will happen to you, I promise." The meeting with the legal team began at 7 in the morning in Richard's improvised office. Throughout the hospital, the most renowned lawyers in the country crowded around a table full of documents and coffee cups. "What we have is explosive," began Dr. Isabella Roberts, head of the legal department. "Victor Hayes is not who he claims to be. The documents proving his guardianship of the children have serious irregularities." Richard leafed through the reports attentively, his face contorting with each new revelation. The investigations had uncovered a complex scheme of document forgery. Victor wasn't really the children's uncle. He was just a distant acquaintance of the family who took advantage of the vulnerable situation after their mother's disappearance. "There's more," continued Dr. James Wilson, a family law specialist. "We found records of other children who passed through his guardianship. They all mysteriously disappeared from the system." Richard's blood froze. The dimension of the situation was much bigger than he had imagined. It wasn't just about protecting Lily and Tommy. There were other children in danger. "I want all possible resources directed to this case," ordered Richard, his voice firm. "Hire more investigators, make contact with social workers, monitor every step of Victor Hayes." Outside the room, Sarah organized the logistics to transfer the children once they were discharged. Richard had bought a house in a gated community with reinforced security. The mansion was being adapted to receive its new inhabitants. Decorated rooms, carefully selected toys, a small children's library. Lily, who was much better now, began attending sessions with a child psychologist at the hospital itself. Dr. Miranda Fletcher had specialized in childhood trauma and was developing delicate work with the girl. "She's progressing well," the psychologist reported during a private conversation with Richard, "but there's still a lot of fear stored up. Lily feels responsible for her brother in a way no child should feel." Richard spent every free moment with the children. Between meetings, he would sit down to color with Tommy or listen to the stories Lily made up. The girl had a special talent for creating fantastic tales where warrior princesses saved their brothers from evil dragons. "Tell another story," Tommy would ask, his eyes shining with admiration for his sister. "Today, I want to tell a different story," said Lily, surprising everyone. "It's the story of a very rich king who had a glass castle in the sky. He thought he was happy because he had a lot of money, but he was actually alone." Richard, who was pretending to work on his laptop, raised his eyes, intrigued. "One day," continued Lily, "the king found 2 lost children in the forest. They were afraid because an evil giant wanted to catch them. The king, who had never helped anyone before, decided to protect the children. And do you know what happened? What? Asked Tommy, completely absorbed in the narrative. His glass castle began to transform into a real castle, because now it had love inside it. Richard felt his eyes water. Sarah, who was at the door of the room, discreetly offered him a handkerchief. That night, while the children slept, Richard received a disturbing call. Victor Hayes had given an interview to a sensationalist newspaper, accusing him of using his economic power to steal the children. He's trying to manipulate public opinion, warned Sarah. Some people are already beginning to question your intentions. Richard remained silent for a few minutes, observing Lily and Tommy through the window of the room. The girl held her brother's hand even during sleep, a habit she had developed on the nights they spent on the streets. Sarah, schedule a new press conference, he decided. But this time, I want it to be different. Let's invite all the families who had children disappear after contact with Victor Hayes. This could be dangerous, pondered Sarah. He has powerful connections. Exactly why we need to act, replied Richard. These children won't just be two more statistics in the system, not while I can do something about it. News of the new. Press conference spread quickly. In the days leading up to the event, dozens of families contacted Richard's office, sharing similar stories about Victor Hayes. The puzzle was beginning to form, revealing a disturbing pattern. On the day of the conference, the auditorium was even fuller than last time. Besides journalists, dozens of families occupied the front rows, many holding pictures of children. The atmosphere was one of expectation and tension. Richard took the stage accompanied by Dr. Isabella and a group of social workers. His countenance was serious but determined. 2 weeks ago, I shared with you my decision to create the New Dawn Foundation, he began. Today I'm here to reveal why this initiative is more urgent than we imagined. The lights in the auditorium dimmed, and a presentation began to be projected on the giant screen behind him. They were documents, photos, and records that evidenced Victor Hayes' scheme. What you will see now is the result of a thorough investigation. This is not just about Lily and Tommy's story, but dozens of children who were manipulated by a flawed system and ill-intentioned people. At the hospital, Sarah watched the broadcast with the children. Lily was especially quiet, her eyes fixed on the television screen. "Why are there so many sad people there?" asked Tommy, noticing the families in the auditorium. Lily held her brother's hand tighter. "They're people Uncle Richard is helping, just like he helped us." Back at the auditorium, the revelations continued. Richard presented each case with surgical precision, exposing the flaws in the child protection system that allowed Victor Hayes to operate for so long. "We are not here just to expose a criminal," declared Richard. "We are here to change the system. From today, the New Dawn Foundation will not only offer shelter and protection to children in vulnerable situations, but will also actively work to reform the laws and procedures that allow predators like Victor Hayes to thrive." The families present began to stand up, many applauding, others crying. It was a moment of collective catharsis, of renewed hope. In the middle of the presentation, Richard received an urgent note from Sarah. His face changed expression for a second, but he maintained his composure. "Victor Hayes has just been located trying to leave the country," he announced, causing commotion in the auditorium. "But you can rest easy. The proper authorities have been notified." After the conference, Richard returned to the hospital. He found Lily awake, waiting for him. "Did you catch Uncle Victor?" she asked, her voice small but firm. Richard sat beside her. "Yes, little one. He will never hurt anyone again." Lily was silent for a moment, processing the information. "No," she finally said. "In the story I told yesterday, after the king saved the children from the evil giant, he built a special place where all children could be safe." Richard smiled, moved by the wisdom of that little girl. "That's exactly what we're going to do, Lily. We're going to build that place together." That night, while the children slept, Richard received official confirmation. The temporary custody request had been approved. Lily and Tommy were officially under his protection. Sarah found him in the hospital corridor, organizing the last details for the children's discharge. "You've really changed," she observed, after 15 years working together. Richard looked out the hospital window, observing the city lights. "No, Sarah, I just found myself." The day of the move to the new house arrived with the promise of a fresh start. Richard had personally planned every detail, transforming the cold and impersonal mansion into a welcoming home. The white walls gained vibrant colors, and the gardens were redesigned to include a complete playground. Lily and Tommy were awestruck as they passed through the gates of the community. The girl held her brother's hand firmly, as she always did in moments of anxiety. The car traveled down the tree-lined avenue until it stopped in front of a house that seemed to come straight out of the fairy tales Lily loved to tell. "Is this our house?" she asked hesitantly. Richard smiled, helping them out of the car. "Yes, it is. Want to see it?" Tommy ran ahead, his energy restored after weeks in the hospital. Lily, on the other hand, walked slowly, observing each detail with curious and cautious eyes. "Come see your rooms," called Sarah, who had personally supervised the decoration. Tommy's room was a dream in shades of blue and green, with a rocket-shaped bed and walls decorated with planets and stars that glowed in the dark. The little boy jumped with joy, running from one side to the other. But it was Lily's room that caused the greatest commotion. The walls were covered with a painting depicting an enchanted forest with fairies hidden among the trees. In one corner, a desk with drawing materials and a brand new laptop waited for her. And most special of all, a bookshelf filled with children's books carefully selected. "You can write your stories here," explained Richard, showing a purple-covered notebook, her favorite color. Lily touched the notebook with reverence, as if it were the most precious object in the world. Her eyes watered, and for the first time since Richard had met her, he saw a truly carefree smile on her face. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging him tightly. The first days in the new house were a time of adaptation. Richard had hired a specialized team to help, a pedagogue to assist with the children's education, which was behind schedule, a nutritionist to take care of their diet, and Dr. Miranda continued with therapy sessions, now in an office set up in the house itself. One morning, while they were having breakfast on the porch, a ritual that Richard insisted on maintaining despite his busy schedule, Lily asked a question that caught him by surprise. "Why did you never have children?" Richard almost choked on his coffee. Sarah, who was passing by the porch at that moment, stopped to hear the answer. "Well," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I think I was too busy trying to build an empire. I thought success meant having a lot of money and power." "And now?" asked Tommy, his face dirty with jelly. "Now I know I was wrong," replied Richard, affectionately cleaning the boy's face. "True success is being able to make a difference in someone's life." Lily absorbed those words in silence, her thoughtful gaze wandering through the garden. After breakfast, she sat at her desk and began to write in her purple notebook. Richard observed her discreetly, amazed at her determination. The frightened and distrustful girl he had met on the streets was gradually transforming into a secure and creative child. At night, after the children were asleep, Richard found Lily's notebook on his desk with a note asking him to read it. It was a new story, different from the others she used to tell. Once upon a time, there was a man who had everything money could buy, but his heart was small because he had never learned to love. One day, he found two little injured birds on the street. Instead of passing by as he always did, he stopped to help. And while he cared for the little birds, something magical happened. His heart began to grow. The more he loved the birds, the more his heart grew, until it became so big that it no longer fit just inside him. It needed to be shared with the whole world. Richard felt tears running down his face as he read. Sarah, who was organizing his schedule for the next day, pretended not to notice but smiled discreetly. The New Dawn Foundation was beginning to take shape. Richard had converted one of his commercial buildings into a modern and welcoming shelter center. The first families were beginning to receive support, and the pilot project for reforming the child protection system was underway. On a Saturday afternoon, While Lily and Tommy played in the garden under the watchful eye of security guards, Richard received an unexpected visit. Jennifer Moore, the shareholder who had questioned his decisions at the board meeting, appeared without warning. "We need to talk, Richard," she said, her tone softer than usual. They sat on the porch, watching the children play. Tommy was trying to climb a tree, while Lily supervised him with the seriousness of an older sister. "You were right," admitted Jennifer, surprising Richard. "I went to see the foundation's work this morning. It's impressive." Richard waited in silence, feeling there was more to come. "You know, I also had a difficult childhood," she continued, her voice slightly breaking. "I grew up in an orphanage. Maybe that's why I became so pragmatic about business. It was my way of protecting myself." The revelation took Richard by surprise. Jennifer had always been known for her coldness in business, much like he himself had been. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. "Because I want to help," she replied, her eyes fixed on the children. "The foundation needs more than just your money, Richard. It needs people who truly understand the cause." At that moment, Lily approached running, her eyes shining with excitement. "Uncle Richard, look what I found," she exclaimed, showing a small bird that had fallen from its nest. Jennifer observed admiringly how Richard immediately transformed, his businesslike posture giving way to a paternal gentleness as he explained to Lily how they could help the little bird. "Let's build a little house for it until we find the nest," he suggested, making the girl's eyes shine even brighter. "Like you did with us?" she asked innocently. Jennifer felt her eyes water at the simplicity and depth of that question. Later, after Jennifer had left, Richard found Lily in her room, drawing. As he approached, he saw that she was creating a comic book about a superheroine who saved children and built houses for them. "Lily," he called softly, "would you like to help other children like you and Tommy?" The girl raised her eyes from her drawing, curious. "The foundation is going to start a new project," he explained. "We're going to create a group where children who have gone through difficult situations can help other children feel safe." "What? Do you think? Can I tell my stories to them?" asked Lily, her eyes shining. "Of course you can," smiled Richard. "In fact, I think your stories are exactly what they need to hear." That night, during dinner, Richard observed his new family with a feeling of fullness he had never experienced before. Tommy was animatedly telling about the bird they had saved. Lily was planning the stories she would tell to the children at the foundation. And Sarah, who had become practically part of the family, smiled discreetly while setting the table. The mansion, once so silent and cold, now overflowed with life and warmth. The children's laughter echoed through the corridors, and Tommy's drawings decorated the refrigerator door. It was a different kind of success, Richard realized, a success that couldn't be measured in numbers or stock shares. 6 months had passed since Lily and Tommy arrived at the mansion. The transformation was visible not only in the children, but in the entire dynamics of the house and Richard's life. The businessman who once only cared about profits and acquisitions was now known as one of the greatest advocates for children's rights in the country. On a spring morning, while Richard worked in his home office, Sarah entered with a different expression on her face. "Sir, a letter arrived. It's from the children's mother." Richard felt his heart stop for a moment. Melissa, Lily, and Tommy's mother had disappeared more than a year ago, without leaving a trace. The investigations had never been able to discover her whereabouts. "Where is she?" he asked, trying to remain calm. "In a recovery center upstate," replied Sarah, handing him the envelope. She saw the report about the foundation on television and recognized the children. Richard opened the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was irregular, but the words overflowed with emotion. "Dear Mr. Adams, I saw my children on television. They are so different, so happy. Lily is beautiful and Tommy has grown so much. I want you to know that I am eternally grateful for having saved my children. When I fled from Victor, I had no choice. He threatened me, said he would hurt the children if I didn't disappear. I've spent the last year trying to recover, trying to be strong enough to come back for them. Now I know they are in good hands." Richard had to stop reading for a moment, his emotions on the surface. The letter continued with Melissa explaining her situation, her recovery process, and her desire to one day be able to be part of her children's lives again. "What are we going to do?" asked Sarah, concerned about the impact this news would have on the children. Richard took a deep breath, his hands still holding the letter. "We're going to do the right thing, Sarah. These children deserve to have their mother back in their lives." That afternoon, Richard found Lily in her favorite place, the library he had set up especially for her. The girl was writing in her purple notebook, completely absorbed in her stories. "Lily," he called softly, "can I sit with you for a bit?" She raised her eyes, smiling. Her hair, once disheveled, was now arranged in an elegant braid, and her eyes shone with a confidence that grew each day. "I'm writing a new story," she said, excited. "It's about a princess who loses her crown but finds an even more precious family." Richard felt a lump in his throat. How to tell her about Melissa without breaking the security she had conquered? "Lily, remember when you told me about your mother? About how she had to leave to protect you and Tommy?" The girl suddenly became serious, her fingers tightly gripping the pencil. "Your mother has contacted us," he said gently. "She's well, she's recovering, and she misses you two very much." Lily remained silent for a long moment, her face a mixture of emotions that Richard couldn't completely decipher. "Is she going to take us away?" she finally asked, her voice small and frightened. "No, little one," Richard hugged her tightly. "No one is going to take you away. Your mother just wants to be part of your life again when she's ready, and if that happens, it will be in whatever way you want." Lily relaxed a bit in his arms. "Can we be like those families in the movies? You know, those that have a bunch of people who love each other?" Richard laughed, moved. "We can be exactly what we want to be." That night, after telling the news to Tommy, who was more concerned with his new video game than anything else, Richard met with his legal team to discuss the next steps. "We'll help Melissa in her recovery," he decided. "The foundation can provide the best treatment, and when she's ready, we'll begin a gradual process of reconnection." Jennifer Moore, who was now an active part of the foundation, smiled approvingly. "You're creating a new model of family, Richard, one that can inspire many other people." The news about Melissa brought a new dynamic to the mansion. Richard, with the help of specialists, began to prepare the children for the eventual reunion with their mother. Dr. Miranda intensified the Nui therapy sessions, using playful techniques to help Lily and Tommy process their feelings. One afternoon, while playing in the garden, Lily surprised everyone with a question. "Can we have a party when Mom comes to visit us?" Richard, who was supervising Tommy in his newest attempt to ride a bicycle, felt his heart warm. "What kind of party would you like to have?" he asked, curious to understand how the girl imagined this moment. "A story party," she exclaimed, her eyes shining. "We can invite all the children from the foundation, and each one can tell a story about their family, and we can make a giant book with all of them." Lily's idea quickly transformed into a larger project. The New Dawn Foundation would organize a story festival where children from different realities could share their experiences through art and narrative. Sarah, who had become a kind of aunt to the children, coordinated the preparations with her characteristic efficiency. The mansion's garden would be transformed into a magical space with colorful tents where children could read, write, and draw. "We need more pillows," insisted Tommy, who had developed a special interest in building pillow forts for his reading sessions. The big day arrived with a special energy in the air. The garden was unrecognizable, decorated with colorful ribbons and balloons. Small art stations were set up under the trees, each dedicated to a different type of creative expression. Melissa arrived accompanied by her therapist. She was nervous, but her eyes shone with emotion at seeing her children. Lily was the first to run toward her, followed by Tommy. The hug that followed was witnessed by everyone with tears in their eyes. "You're so beautiful," whispered Melissa, touching her daughter's face. "And you, my little one, are huge." Richard observed the scene from a distance, giving the family space to reconnect. Jennifer approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've created something extraordinary here," she said. "It's not just a foundation or a shelter. It's a new concept of family. The festival was an absolute success. Children of all ages shared their stories, some sad, others funny, all important. Lily, as the host, presented her newest creation, The Hart Family, a story about how love can create bonds stronger than blood. At the end of the day, as families began to leave, Richard found Lily sitting on her favorite swing, watching the sunset. "Is everything okay?" he asked, sitting next to her. "You know, Uncle Richard," she began with that wisdom that always surprised him, "I used to think that family was just people who had the same blood, but now I know that family is who makes our heart grow." Richard smiled, moved. "And did your heart grow today?" "A lot," she replied, opening her arms to show the size. "Now I have you, Sarah, Mom, Tommy, Aunt Jennifer, all the children from the foundation. It's such a big family that it barely fits in my heart." That night, after everyone had left, Richard found a new drawing from Lily on his desk. It was a portrait of all of them: him, Sarah, Melissa, the children, Jennifer, and all the people who had become part of that unconventional family. At the top of the page, she had written in her careful handwriting, "The biggest family in the UA world." 1 year after the Story Festival, the New Dawn Foundation had transformed into a national model for child protection. The project, initiated by Richard to save 2 children, now impacted thousands of lives across America. But the greatest transformation continued to happen inside his own home. Melissa, after successfully completing her treatment, had moved into a house in the same community, allowing the children to maintain a balanced routine between the 2 residences. Richard, who had initially feared losing his place in Lily and Tommy's lives, discovered that love only multiplied. On a special morning, Lily came running into Richard's office, carrying a golden envelope. "Uncle Richard! It's here! It's here!" she shouted, jumping with joy. Richard took the envelope with curiosity. It was the response from a major publishing house about the book of stories Lily had written with his help. Heart Stories was a collection of narratives she had created during her process of healing and transformation. "Do you want to open it yourself?" he offered, returning the envelope. Lily bit her lip, nervous. What if they didn't like it? "Then we'll look for another publisher that knows how to recognize the special talent of a young writer." With trembling fingers, Lily opened the envelope. Her eyes quickly scanned the letter, growing with emotion at each line. They want to publish it," she shouted, hugging Richard tightly. "And they want other children from the foundation to write their stories too, to make a whole collection." The news spread quickly through the house. Tommy, who was having a math lesson with his private tutor, abandoned the equations to celebrate with his sister. Sarah immediately began organizing a celebration party, and Melissa was called to share the special moment. "I knew you could do it," said Melissa, hugging her daughter with pride. "You always had the gift of transforming even the most difficult moments into stories of hope." Richard observed the scene with an overflowing heart. On his desk, next to million-dollar contracts and financial reports, was Lily's purple notebook, the same one he had given her on her first day at the mansion. Its pages were now filled not just with stories, but with a testimony of transformation. Jennifer Moore, who had become a constant presence in their lives, arrived later with a surprise: the first printed copy of Lily's book. The publisher expedited the process when they learned the story behind the book, she explained, handing the bound volume to Lily. The cover was beautiful, a drawing of a girl holding a man in a suit's hand, with birds flying around them. The title, Heart Stories, shined in golden letters. "Read the first story to us?" asked Tommy, snuggling into his sister's lap. Lily opened the book with reverence, her small hands caressing the pages with care. The first story was precisely the one she had written about the man with a small heart who found 2 injured little birds. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice clear and confident, "there was a man who had everything money could buy." As Lily read, Richard noticed that everyone in the room had tears in their eyes. Sarah discreetly wiped her face with a handkerchief. Jennifer smiled emotionally, and Melissa held Tommy's hand, who listened to the story as if it were the first time. The story was no longer just about him and the children. It was about transformation. about how love can change people and institutions, about how small acts of kindness can trigger waves of change that affect generations. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Richard found a new note from Lily on his desk. Dear Uncle, Richard, remember when you asked me why I liked telling stories so much? Now I know the answer. It's because stories have the power to change the world. You changed my story, and now we're changing the story of many other children together. With love, Lily P.S. Tommy wants to know if we can build an even bigger library in the backyard to store all the books we're going to publish. The launch of Lily's book turned into a national event. The New Dawn Foundation organized a large literary fair where children from all over the country came to share their own stories. The mansion's garden, once again, filled with life and colors. Richard, wearing his favorite suit, proudly watched as Lily signed copies of her book. The frightened girl he had found on the streets had transformed into a confident young author, inspiring other children to find their own voice. "You've created something revolutionary," commented a reporter covering the event. "How does it feel, seeing all this impact?" Richard smiled, observing the scene around him. Tommy was in a corner teaching other children how to build reading pillow forts. Melissa was coordinating a storytelling workshop. Sarah and Jennifer were organizing the distribution of books to social projects. "I didn't create this," he replied. "It was two children who taught me the true meaning of success." The fair extended throughout the weekend. Famous writers came to give talks, publishers announced projects to publish more stories from children at the foundation, and business people from across the country committed to replicating the New Dawn model in their cities. On the last day of the event, Lily took the stage for a special moment. She had prepared a surprise for Richard. "Today, I want to tell a new story," she announced, her voice firm at the microphone. "It's the story of how a man learned that family isn't something we find, but something we build together, every day." Richard felt his heart race as he recognized his own story being told from Lily's perspective. The girl emotionally described how a lonely businessman had his world transformed by two children and how that transformation ended up changing the lives of thousands of other people. "And do you know what the most beautiful part of this story is?" concluded Lily, her eyes shining. "It has no end, because every time we help someone, every time we open our heart, the story continues to grow." The audience erupted in applause. Richard couldn't contain his tears as he climbed the stage to hug Lily. Tommy ran to join them, followed by Melissa, Sarah, and Jennifer. It was a different family, built not by blood ties, but by choices of love. Later, when the fair was coming to an end and the last guests were leaving, Richard found Lily in her favorite spot in the garden, the swing under the big tree. "You know, Uncle Richard," she said, looking at the stars, "I think I understand why all this happened." "Really?" he asked, sitting beside her. "And why was that?" "Because sometimes we need to get lost to find the right path. You were lost in your world of money and power, and we were lost on the streets. But when we found each other, we discovered that the real treasure wasn't in your vaults, but here." She pointed to her heart. Richard hugged Lily, feeling the profound wisdom in her words. His business empire continued to exist, but now it had a greater purpose. Each business, each investment was aligned with the mission of transforming lives. The sun was setting on the New York horizon, painting the sky in golden hues. In the mansion's garden, the last visitors of the fair were storing their books and dreams. Lily had transformed her pain into stories of hope, and these stories now traveled across the country, touching other hearts, changing other lives. "And they lived happily ever after?" asked Tommy, who had joined them on the swing. Lily smiled, hugging her brother. "No, Tommy. We live happily each day, building our story together, and that's even better than forever."